Okay, so I'm just going to get started. And like I said, welcome to Family History Club, and we're doing Ancestry.com Beyond the Basics today. And if you are interested in any future virtual events, definitely check out our website. And you can also sign up for our e-newsletter if you'd like to stay connected with what programs we're going to be doing. And if you have questions during the presentation, if you'll just type those in the chat box, or if at the end you can ask them, you can unmute yourself and ask the questions. If you wouldn't mind going ahead and muting yourself while I do the presentation, just so we don't get any like audio feedback. And any questions, just put them in the chat. I'll try to get to as many as possible. And if you should have received a link to the class handout in your registration email, but if not, we'll add that again in the chat so you can get it. And I'm also going to add a pedigree chart. It's a free pedigree chart that we've created that you can get. Okay. So let me introduce myself. My name is Shanna, and I'm the South Carolina Room Supervisor here at the library. And our moderator today, his name is Nathaniel, and he is our digital literacy coordinator, and he's going to be kind of watching the chat, and he's can answer technical questions if you have any issues with Zoom. So he's here today to help. But we're going to dive in pretty quickly here, but I just wanted to talk about a few class goals that I hope that we can accomplish in this hour, and it's going to go by pretty quickly. But I want us to learn how to perform intermediate to advanced search techniques, and this class is geared towards those who have already been to the Introduction to Ancestry class, which we did last month, or have some experience using Ancestry. If you're brand new, that's okay, but there may be a few things that you might be a little unclear of, because I'm going with the assumption that you have done some basic searching on Ancestry, but definitely feel free to watch and learn as you go. And then I'm going to implement filters to narrow our search results. I'm going to show you how that you can do that. And then I also want to talk about when we find records on Ancestry, how can we evaluate those records for accuracy? And in particular, I want to mention the public trees on Ancestry. I'm also going to talk about how you can use the card catalog, and we're going to look at a couple different collections. And then lastly, I'm going to show you how to find some browse only / unindexed collections. And Nathaniel, if you wouldn't mind launching the poll. I have a poll that I'd like to try. Let's see if you all wouldn't mind, I'm curious of what you might be most excited to learn about today from the list that I just gave. And you can click on one of those options there. It's what are you most excited to learn about today? And this is an anonymous poll, so we'll just see what everyone's interested in. And if I have like a larger amount on one section, I might spend a little bit more time talking about that. Give everybody a few more seconds to vote here if you'd like. Completely optional. Okay. We're neck and neck on the intermediate to advanced search tips. Oh, it's leading right now. Okay. I'm going to end the poll. And it looks like performing the intermediate to advanced search tips was the top choice, and then locating unindexed collections was the next one. So I'll share those results with you. Okay, awesome. Always like to get feedback of what you all are interested in learning. And before we get started, this is going to be a little bit of a review if you attended the intro class, but we will be using the Ancestry Library Edition. And basically the Ancestry Library Edition is a free version of Ancestry that is available at all of our branch locations. And a membership charge with Ancestry, just to compare, is about, as of this recording, $99 for 6 months. So it can be pretty expensive. So we're very fortunate to have the Ancestry Library Edition that we can use. And there's just a couple of information about the little bit of the differences there, but there's over 10,000 databases on the library edition. So there's plenty of record collections for you to use for your genealogy research. Okay, so before we dive in and I'm going to demo some searching with you, I did want to review on how to access the Ancestry Library Edition. So I'm going to go out of my PowerPoint here, and then I'm going to show you how to do that from our website. And like I said, this may be a review for some, but I definitely want to make sure that everyone knows how to get there. And you're welcome to follow along with me while I'm doing this presentation if you'd like to do some of the search tips that I'm doing, but you can also just sit back and relax and watch me do these demos. So the first thing, in order to access it, we need to be on the library's homepage, and that is greenvillelibrary.org. So navigate to the library's homepage, and then at the top, you'll see the Learning and Research tab. And under the Learning and Research tab, you then want to go to the Genealogy and Local History section, and then go down to where it says Research Your Family Tree, and click on Research Your Family Tree. This will get you to our genealogy databases, and Ancestry is the third one down. And I want to mention something about Ancestry is that typically it is in library use only at any of our branch locations, but due to the pandemic, access has been temporarily allowed to where you can use it at home with your library card and your PIN number. So if you are at home and you click on Ancestry, it will ask you to put your library card and PIN number in, and your PIN number is usually the last 4 digits of your phone number. But if for some reason you can't get logged in, contact your local branch location and they can help you out and take a look at your card. If you're on the library's premises, you should be able to get right in, or if you're connected to the library's public Wi-Fi, you'll get right in like I am right now. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is some of our filtering options. And when I do the intro class, I kind of do more of a basic search. So this is just kind of going to expand on that. And we are still going to go to the begin searching box, this green box right here. And we're going to let that load. And last class, I used the example of Lucille Ball. And I'm going to use her again just to show you some different options here. So I'm going to show you how to do some filtering, and I'm going to type in her name, which is Lucille Desiree Ball. So I typed in her first and her last name, and then I'm typing in where she was born, which is Jamestown in New York, and that's that first one that came up, and I can just click that. And then I can type in her birth year, but you'll notice that there's this calculator feature here, and you can actually click on that. And I don't know, I'm not that great with math, so I like having this calculator. So if you know that someone was 40 years old in 1951, and then you click on OK, it's going to give you the birth year. And I calculated that before class, and so I know that's her birth year. But anyway, now how are we going to use filters? So one of the options is to actually start filtering from this very first screen. And you'll see that there is a first and name field, and next underneath the name, there's this exact with a box by it. And if I click on this box, you'll see that some additional options come up. And with this checked, right now it would search exactly as I have her name typed, Lucille Desiree. And the default, if I don't check this box, the default is it's not going to apply any filters, but it'll choose the ones that are most relevant to what I've typed. But my another option is I can do an exact match and sounds like her name. And that's basically going to search for phonetic variations of the name, names that are, sounds like that. But there's also this similar option. If we choose the similar, it's actually going to search for alternates and spelling combinations that are commonly used with the name. And then the third option is I can also search for any initials that may come up. And I know that this is very common that people used initials sometimes instead of their full name. So that could be a good one to check. But when we go over to the last name field, you'll see there's also an exact with a box again. And if I click on that one, there's a very similar, but there's one option that's different. So the first one is sounds like. Once again, that's going to search for a phonetic variation. And then similar is going to search for ones that have a similar spelling or meaning. And then what is Soundex? So Soundex is the third option. And basically, the Soundex is an algorithm that is used to search for alternate spellings of a name using the way the name is pronounced. So it's an algorithm, and that's just another option that you have with the last name. When you get down to location, you'll see the exact to this place. So if I do exact to this place, it's going to search Jamestown is the city, Chautauqua is the county, New York, of course, is the state, and in the USA. So if I say exact to this place, it's going to search exactly what I have chosen up here. But I could also do exact and the county, exact to the county. So that would be searching for maybe different cities within the Chautauqua County. I could do county and adjacent counties, and that would, of course, search for counties nearby as well. If I choose exact to the state, then it'll also pull records from the entire state of New York. We're not just limiting it to the county or city. I could do state and adjacent states, and that will also connect us to surrounding states, records from those. And then, of course, country would search for the entire United States. And then when we go over to the birth year, it's a little different. Right now, if I choose exact, it's going to search just for 1911 and filter those to 1911. But I also have the option to do plus or minus 1 year. So I could search prior to 1911 and the year after 1911. I also have the plus or minus 2 year option, the plus or minus 5 years, or plus or minus 10 years. And I like to start my searches fairly broad and then refine, just because I don't want to filter too much and not have enough results. So I may, if I'm fairly sure about the birth year, I may do plus or minus 5 years. Some additional options that we have here, we can click on show more options. I could add events from Lucy's life. I could add her marriage, when she was married, when she died. I could also add family members. So let's say I wanted to add her father, who was Henry Ball, and I could type in his name. You'll notice that there's also these exact boxes here, but when I click on it, there's no other option besides exact. Once I click on it, it's not searching for similar, it's not searching for sounds like. I either have it completely unfiltered or clicking it to do exact. And let's just try searching with what I've put in and see what comes up. I've still done, I think fairly broad, but I did put her father in there, and I did do an exact match. So I really don't have that many results. I only have 570. And if I had done a completely unfiltered search, I would probably get over 400,000 results. And now that we've used some of these filters, I can always adjust in this screen as well. I can drag these sliders if it's, if I want to see more results than 570, I could try making these a little bit more broad, because right now on her birth year, I'm at plus or minus 5 years. I could easily drag this and make it broader and then click update. And now I've got a few more options there, and you can just play around with that and change it until you get, enough results, or refine. If you have too many, you can make it more exact if you want it to. So now I do want to jump in to kind of, when we see records like this, how do we evaluate accuracy, and how do we evaluate the records against one another? And something to kind of think about, and you can even type in the chat if you have an answer, but if we were looking for a birth date of an ancestor, which do you think would be the more accurate record and that we put more stock in? Would it be a birth certificate or a census record? So kind of maybe just think about that for a second. And really, when we're looking at records, usually the better one is going to be the ones that were created more closely to the event. And the ones that are further removed from the event may not be as accurate. And we're also looking at things called primary resources, and then you have secondary resources. So for instance, a birth record would be a primary resource, and it was created right at the birth of a person, usually. Sometimes there's a delayed birth certificate, so I'm not talking about those. But usually, birth certificates are created right along with when a person was born. Now, if we were to find, because in the census record, you can actually find the age of someone and you could calculate when they were born and you would have a general idea. But when you would be evaluating, if you had two records and the census was different than the birth certificate, I would be more likely to go with the birth certificate, because that happened more closely to the birth of the person and it's an original record. It was, created not long after they were born and is a primary source. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at records and you need to evaluate them, that sometimes you're going to have records that have conflicting information. One may say a birth year is at one time, and then another record may have a different birth year. So you want to try to kind of be thinking about some questions to ask yourself is when and where was the record created? Who created the record? Why was it created? And who provided the information for the record? And that's something I think, especially with the death certificates, you'll usually have on death certificates, it'll list who the informant was. And was this the person who gave the information for the death certificate? Were they a direct family member? Were they a son or a daughter? Or were they a neighbor down the street that didn't really know the family very well? So you kind of have to ask yourself these questions, and that will help you evaluate the records. And one record set in particular that I want to mention specifically is the family trees on Ancestry. And so when we look over here by the categories, we have all different options that I can refine even further. I could look at just the census records. I could look at just military records that might pertain to Lucille Ball. I could look at court land and will records. And then you'll see this, there's a family tree option. And I'm going to click on the family tree option. And it's going to load family trees. And what are these family trees? Where are they coming from? And basically, anyone can do this. Anyone can make a free tree with Ancestry's tree. And they have a free version. You don't have to be a member. It is separate from the library edition, so don't confuse it, because that's very common, is that it doesn't connect to the library edition, but you can still fill in your tree and use the library edition as a tool. But you have trees that members of Ancestry have created, and they've put in information. You'll see over here, there's public member trees and there's private member trees. And on Ancestry, anyone who creates a tree can decide if they want it to be publicly available. The publicly available trees we can see here, and I can actually go into those and see what other members of Ancestry have put into the tree. A private member tree is a tree that someone has, for whatever reason, decided not to make public. And you'll see that's one of my first results, is it says the author of this tree has decided to keep it private. Ask them nicely and they might share. So you actually have an ability to contact the person who's created the tree and see if they will make it public. But for the library edition, we are able to go ahead and look at the public member trees. But one thing I want to say about these trees is we really need to be careful when we look at them, because not all of them are going to be accurate information. Not everyone has cited sources. Not everyone has attached records to the tree. So when I'm going through and looking at these public member trees, you'll notice it'll say right below the title of the tree how many records are attached to the tree, how many sources are available, and sometimes they'll have photos as well. And I always like to try to look for one that has the most sources or the most records attached or has photos. And then what we need to do is actually go into the tree and then evaluate those records. So I'm going to click on this first one here. And the first thing it does is it pulls up what's called a life story, which is kind of an overview, which is taken from facts that have been put into the tree. So I actually want to click on the facts because I like to go and view it from this screen where I can see the sources that have been cited that connect to these facts. And I can see that this person has added several sources, and I can even click on these and view and evaluate to see if they actually do pertain to Lucille Ball. And I'm going to be honest with you, I've used a public member tree and I've seen some where they've cited sources, but when I've gone into the source, it hasn't actually been my family member because I found things and I'm like, this is a different person with a similar name and it's not them. So let's try if we go to this New York passenger list. For instance, it's kind of going to give me an overview and then I can view the image. I always like to go into the actual record and I can see if this looks like Lucille, the record for Lucille Ball that we're looking for. And she is right here. Zoom in a little bit. So she was coming back she was sailing from Cuba back to Ellis Island. And it lists some information about her age and where she was from. So we can kind of use the information from this record to evaluate if this is actually a record pertains to her. We would also want to look at other records as well. And that's one thing. If you're looking for a birth date or a death date for an ancestor, I suggest trying to find and think of think of all of the possible resources for that information. For instance, if you were looking for a birth date of an ancestor, you would maybe try to see if there's a birth certificate. You could also check a death certificate because the death certificate often will list a birthday as well. You could look at obituaries, often will list when someone was born, or a birth announcement in the newspaper. You could get some information from the census to help kind of narrow down what year the person was born. You could try church records. Sometimes the marriage records will have it as well. So there's all different kinds of places where you might find that birth information. So I would try to find all of the possible resources that I could find that mention the birthday, compare them all to one another, and then make my conclusion after I've evaluated it, what the true birth year is. So now I do want to go back. We've kind of talked about the family trees. And just to, take with a grain of salt, the family trees, they can be a great launching point for you. Someone may have already done a lot of the work. You can see on this one, for instance, they've also connected to Lucy's mother. So I can also go to her page and then kind of evaluate the records that have been connected to her on here. And you could keep going back and doing that. And that might help you really quickly fill in your tree. But like I said, you still want to carefully evaluate every single cited source here to make sure that it's correct. But if we go back up, I wanted to talk about another search tip of doing a wildcard search. So I'm just going to click on the search tab at the top and click on all categories. And that's just going to get us back to our search screen here. And I'm going to use a fictional person for this one. I've made up a man whose name is John Redman, and I want to talk about using the wildcards. So wildcards can come in handy, especially when you have a name that has a lot of potential variations. And let's say this person's name is Redmond with R-E-D-M-O-N-D. But sometimes we may see records that don't have the D. Maybe they spell it R-E-D-M-O-N or R-E-D-M-A-N. And a wildcard can really help with those name variations. So the first one I want to show is how to use a wildcard, which is basically just a special character that takes the place of one or more letters. The first one I'm going to show you is the question mark wildcard. If I insert a question mark in between the M and the N, that question mark is taking the place of a letter. Like we're not sure if it's an O or an A, and the question mark is taking the place. And I should see when I click search, I should return results for both Redmond with an O and Redmond with an A. And I'm going to say that this person is from Greenville. Like I said, this is fictional, but I'm going to use a 1900 as the birthday. So let's try this. When I click search, let's see what happens. So right away, I can see that there was actually a John Redmond in Greenville. And I have two. I have Redmond with an A, and I also have Redmond with an O on here. So my did work. It is returning results for both of those variations there. There is also an additional wildcard that we can use. We can use an asterisk, which will actually take the place of 0 to 5 letters of a name. So how do we do that? I can easily go up here to edit search, and then I can try it with the asterisk. And since I'm looking potentially for Redmond with a D, Redmond with an O, and Redmond with an A, I'm going to put the asterisk right after the M there. So theoretically, I should return all 3 of those variations when I click search. So let's see what happens. Okay, so I'd see that that worked for Redmond. I'm already getting Redmond results at the top. If I continue to scroll down, here we go. We have the other variations. We have with an A and with an O, but without the D. So I can see that there's 3 of those variations there, that it is working for my search here. So that's what I would say is if you have a name that commonly has variations. I was actually looking through our family files in the South Carolina room yesterday, and I was just curious of how many names have variations, and there's just so many. I was looking at Clark, and Clark can be spelled without an E, and sometimes it does have an E. Houston, there's a lot of variations for Houston. So that would be a tip, that if you haven't tried the wildcards yet, to kind of give that a shot and see if that helps you get some additional results. I did want to mention a couple of things, and this is on your handout as well. So if you want a refresher, or you can always look back on the handout and see how to do the wildcard searches. But a couple of notes: the wildcard must, when you do a wildcard search, you must have 3 letters. So right now, when I did John Redmond like this, I already had 4 letters. So that was good. I have to have at least 3 in order to have the wildcard search work. And I can use the wildcard, either that question mark or asterisk. I can use it at the beginning or the end of my name, but I can't use it on both. It won't work if you try it on the first and the last part of the name. And the wildcards, we will not Soundex matches. I talked about Soundex earlier. They will not work with that. So keep that in mind when you are trying your wildcard searches. So now I wanted to move on to talking a little bit about the card catalog and what can be discovered when using the card catalog on Ancestry. So if you go up to search, you can click on that bottom one. It says card catalog, and that's going to take us to a listing of all of the available record collections on Ancestry. And like I said, there's over 10,000. So there's so many on here, and you theoretically could look through every single one of them, but that would take a really long time. So you would want to refine them. But one thing I like to keep an eye on is over here on the right where it says activity. Right now it's being sorted, it defaults to the date added. So all of these that say new, these have been recently added to Ancestry Library Edition. So I think that's pretty neat because they're constantly adding new record collections. So if you've been away from Ancestry for a few months or longer, definitely come back and look at these, because you may find a set of records that weren't previously available that could really help with your research. And another thing I want to mention is you can also sort by the date the record was updated. So I like to do that one as well. And when you do that, you'll definitely see the new ones too, but you'll also see some of these that have been updated. So any record that's been updated could potentially have a lot more information than previously. If I'd already looked at that record, now I know, okay, it's recently been updated. I probably want to look at that again. Like here's one on Civil War muster rolls. So that might be one, you know, if you have somebody in New York, that might be good to look at. So I always like to check and see which ones have been recently updated. And then you can also sort by category, just because there's just way too many, obviously, to look at all these different pages here. So I like to look at the different categories over here and filter by collection. But another thing that you can do is you can also filter by location. So just to kind of show you how you would do that, you can search by USA, and then I can refine that down to, let's just say, South Carolina. And then I could also filter by county over here, or I could even use the date filter. So let's just say I wanted to look at records for South Carolina from the 1600s, and I click on 1600s. So let's see, still have quite a few on here that pertain to the 1600s. I could look at this family histories one. So that's just another way to find collections in the card catalog. But one of the biggest, I feel like not a lot of people know about in the card catalog are browse only collections. And I want to talk about how you can find these collections, because they seriously can be a treasure trove of information. And these are unindexed collections on Ancestry. So basically, if you were to do a search for your ancestor, if they happened to be in one of these unindexed collections, it will not return on the search page, and you would miss it because it will not show up because it hasn't been indexed yet. So how do we find these on Ancestry, and how do you utilize them? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the clear all, so it clears all of the filters I just did. And I'll tell you how to kind of go about finding them, because they don't label them on Ancestry. They won't tell you this is browse only. And I can't filter over here at this time. It would be great if I could. I can't filter by browse only. So one way to do it is if you have a family from a particular state, you have a lot of relatives like from Virginia, for instance, you could try typing in the state. I'm going to do South Carolina just to show you an example. And then I'm going to hit search. And when you're trying to find a browse only collection, you really will have to kind of go one by one and see if they're browse only, because there's nothing really here that will indicate, except for I have noticed that if you look at this records column, if you see a record set that has 0, that's kind of jumps out to me. Like there's no way there's 0 records in there. And I have a pretty good feeling that this is going to be a browse only collection. And you have some other ones down here that have 38 or 40. Those may also be browse only. I will say that sometimes I've seen a really low number and I click in and I find out, nope, it's not browse only. But let me show you what I mean when I say browse only and what that looks like. So I do believe this one is a browse only. It's the South Carolina probate record, files and loose papers. It's from 1732 to 1964. So that's a great date range, goes pretty far back. And now that I'm in this record collection, you can see there's no search area. I can't type in a name and search within this collection. That's a dead giveaway that it's a browse only. And then over here, you will see this, browse this collection. Usually you'll have this, and then you won't be able to search, but you'll be able to go to these little drop down buttons and choose different selections and then browse the image. One thing I like to do, because these vary wildly about how they're organized, and I like to try to figure out, how is this record set up? What exactly is this record about? And usually you'll see a little kind of screen cap of, just a little bit of information about the collection right here in this field. Or sometimes you'll see that I can learn more about this collection at Family Search. So I'm just going to click on that. And now you'll see that this is giving me the information about this record set. And what exactly is this collection? It's a collection that includes wills, records of estates, and guardianships recorded by the counties of South Carolina. And even though it said 1732, it looks like most of these records are going to be the mid 1800s to 1930. And what can this record tell me? Like this is kind of helpful. Maybe I can see, is this something that's going to be maybe useful for me to even bother with looking through this collection? And if I was looking for something about, wills and, these are probate records, this would definitely be a collection I would probably be interested in viewing. And then I just have a few more information about what do I need to kind of search this collection. And it's helpful to obviously know the name of the person I'm trying to find and about the time that they died and where they were living. So now that I have just a little bit more information from this page, this might help me as I go through this record set to see how it's organized. So I'm going to show you an example of what this looks like. And we're going to go down to county, and I'm just going to choose Greenville. And once I choose Greenville, then it says court name and record type. And I have only one option, probate court. But I do have two options for the date ranges. So let's just do the earliest one, 1787 through 1868. And now I'm into the collection here, and I can basically just browse. It's almost like if you've used microfilm at the library and you put a reel on and you just have to kind of scroll through and look through. There's not a way to search. This is kind of the same thing, except it's been scanned. And I can click these little arrows. There's a right and left arrow, and I can just click through this collection. And I can see kind of the title page out here. And if you click on the little film strip at the bottom, you can usually get a little preview. But this is going to be an actual record here. And it's not transcribed. Sometimes, Ancestry will transcribe certain collections. This is not transcribed. And so you will have to, kind of decipher sometimes the cursive, and that can be difficult, but there's definitely information to be found in these records. And because they don't show up on a search, you might be missing these if you haven't searched browse only thus far. And let's say that I go through one of these browse only collections and I find something that I would like to save. And to do that, you may remember from the intro classes, I can go up to the top and I can click on this save button here. And I have the option to send the image home, and that would allow me to put in my email. Let's say I'm at the library. I came one afternoon and I did some research here, and I want to also view this when I get home, and I don't want to have to go through searching for it again. I could send it to my email and then pull it up from home, and you can do up to 300, I believe, that you can send to your email. I also have the option where I could save it to the computer. So right now is a great time to take advantage of being able to use Ancestry from home, since that will be until at least June 30th of 2021 and possibly longer if they decide to extend it. But you can save this while you're at home to your computer, or if you want to save it to a flash drive. And then you also have the option to, if you click on the printer, the little hammer and wrench tool, you can actually print this image. And just to mention again, there's a couple of different printing options. I can print the entire image, or I can print in a zoomed view of the image. You could do both if you'd like. And then you also can print the source data, and I always suggest keeping track of the source data and citing your sources as well. And so I always like to do this, especially even when I just save it to my computer. So I have the information about where this record came from. And when you're making a file name, if you're saving it, I always try to be very descriptive of what my file is of. I try to put the title, I like to put the date and the page number when I'm saving it, just so I can easily see without even opening it what exactly it is. And then Ancestry does suggest for something like this to print it on landscape. So you can, when you go and open your printer settings, I always like to try to see how it looks on landscape, and usually it'll look better on landscape. Okay, the other thing I want to talk about now that we're in this browse only collection is kind of what I call breadcrumbs. If you go up to the top here, we can kind of see how we got to this point. So we selected Greenville. We had only one option for the court. So we did probate court, and then we had two options for the date. And if I click on the date, I can actually easily get to the next date range if I'd like, and I can click on that. And I can get to the second part of the date range for Greenville. And I can also go up here, and let's say that I wanted to go to a different county, and I could click on Greenville and I could easily get to a different county. So let's say I wanted to do Lawrence County, and Lawrence County actually has the estate papers, and this one actually has an index to the estate papers. So I would want to probably look at the index first and then go to the date range. But definitely kind of check out the little breadcrumbs here so you can look at different sets of in the collection. And then if you ever need to go back, or you want to go and just do a regular search again, like a basic search, you can just click on this back arrow. I always like to use this arrow rather than my browser's arrow, because sometimes when I do the browser's arrow, it won't take me directly back to the page before. So I always like to use the arrow in Ancestry, and sometimes it will just take you back to this main menu here. But you can go ahead and begin searching a new record set. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my slideshow now. And we're going to wrap up, and I'm going to give some time for questions here, but wanted to mention a few additional online resources that we have in our genealogy databases. And we are a Family Search affiliate, so you can get records that are available at the library that may not be available at home. So I did want to mention that one in particular. We also have Fold 3, which you can use specifically for military records. Heritage Quest has a lot of local and family histories on that one. And we also have the newspapers.com library edition. And so that one can be a very neat resource, especially if you are looking for maybe obituaries or marriage or birth announcements, something like that in the newspaper. And we have several other databases, but these are some of the main ones that get used a lot and that can be very useful to your genealogy research. And of course, I do always want to mention that you can come by the South Carolina room, but I wanted to just talk briefly about how we are doing our visits right now. And we are scheduling visits, but you can do a 1-hour research appointment. And I have the website here. You can go online and request an appointment, and staff will get back to you and get that scheduled with you. We also have online record requests. For those of you who are Greenville County residents with a Greenville County library card, you can actually request obituaries and news articles for free right now. So if you have some ancestors from the Greenville area, definitely kind of take a look at that and take advantage of that. And you can request those online. If you're not a Greenville County resident or have a Greenville County library card, it's a nominal fee. Obituaries are $5. So you can still take advantage of that resource, and you can pay online, and then we can email you the record, or if you'd like us to mail a hard copy, we can do that as well. And then in the SC room, we have all different kinds of resources. We have, of course, books. We have a lot of family and local history books, and we have maps of the area. We also have books that are even pertaining to states along the migration routes that we're kind of into or out of South Carolina. We have microfilm. We have South Carolina death certificates on microfilm, Greenville County marriage licenses, and of course the Greenville News on microfilm. We have photograph collections. We have a digital collection, so you can actually go on our website and view that from home. And we do have photographs in our archive room that you can come by and physically look at those. And vertical files, what I mean by that is we have subject files on all different ranges of topics, including communities in Greenville. We have just so a wide range, anything from even lakes and parks and all kinds of topics. We also have family files on different surnames, and we have biographical files and business files in the South Carolina room. So if you haven't visit us, please schedule a visit if you can. We'd love for you to come by and show you the room and show you our resources.